You've probably heard about cruise ship technical glitches, Wi-Fi dropping, power outages, maybe a GPS hiccup when sailing through bad weather, but what happened on my Alaskan voyage wasn't a glitch. It was the night the world stopped at exactly 12:17 a.m. Every phone, every watch, every screen 3 hours erased. And in that silence, under the aurora, something else came aboard. It was supposed to be the highlight of the trip. The third night at sea, the captain announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, if the skies remain clear, you'll be treated to a view of the aurora borealis tonight. Decks 11 and 12 provide the best vantage point. By 11:30 p.m., the decks were packed. Passengers in parkas and scarves pressed against the railings, hot chocolate steaming in paper cups, phones lifted like candles in the dark. The cold was sharp enough to bite through gloves, but no one cared. When the first streaks of green shimmered across the sky, the crowd gasped in unison. The aurora moved like liquid fire, twisting into ribbons, collapsing into curtains of light. Cameras clicked. Voices whispered reverently. For once, even children went silent. I held my phone up too, trying to capture the impossible. The cold stung my fingers, but I didn't lower it. And then, everything froze. It wasn't gradual. 1 second, the deck buzzed with chatter. The next, silence. My phone screen went black. Not dimmed. Not powered down. Dead. Around me, passengers stared at their devices in confusion. I heard mutters. My camera just died. Phone won't turn back on. Is the Wi-Fi down? But it wasn't just Wi-Fi. Digital watches stopped ticking. Screens on smartwatches locked at 12:17. Even the ship's wall clocks, bright red LED displays above the bar, flickered and froze. The only sound left was the wind cutting. Across the deck, someone laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but no one joined. It felt like the air itself had thickened, like time had hiccuped and forgotten to restart. The blackout lasted 3 hours. We stood on deck, waiting for the crew to announce something. Anything. But the intercom stayed silent. No captain's voice. No staff explanations. When the devices finally blinked back to life, it was 3:17 a.m. Every clock agreed, as if nothing had happened. No missed seconds. No gap acknowledged. But the satellite logs some tech-savvy passengers later discovered recorded a blank stretch. 3 hours erased completely. The crew dismissed it as a technical malfunction. But that didn't explain what people began to whisper about the next morning. A college student, bundled in a neon jacket, swore she saw figures on the ice floes during the blackout. Not seals, not shadows. People. Pale, motionless figures standing in a perfect circle around the ship. She said they didn't move, didn't waver, just stared up at the decks. When the lights flickered back at 3:17, the ice was empty again. She told her friends, but they laughed it off. Still, she didn't go on deck again for the rest of the voyage. Another account spread from a fisherman traveling with his wife. He claimed he fell asleep in his cabin around midnight, tucked under 3 blankets, but when he woke, his hands were blue. Doctors later confirmed the early stages of frostbite. How? They asked. He hadn't left the cabin. The thermostat showed 72 degrees all night. He couldn't explain it. All he remembered was a dream of walking barefoot on snow, surrounded by whispers he couldn't quite understand. I had a dream too. I was walking across a frozen plain, snow crunching under my bare feet. The aurora overhead pulsed brighter, whiter until it hurt my eyes, and in the distance I heard voices. Not words I could understand, just low, overlapping whispers, like dozens of people praying at once. When I turned, there were shapes moving just beyond the edge of my vision. Pale limbs, hollow eyes, their mouths opened, whispering louder. I woke with my throat raw, as if I'd been breathing in freezing air. When I checked my phone, it showed 3:17 a.m., the same as everyone else. By morning, The crew insisted nothing unusual had happened. The captain joked at breakfast that sometimes satellites get shy in the north, but passengers noticed problems with their devices. Phones skipped backwards, losing hours. Alarms went off at wrong times. Cameras showed warped photos, blurs of light, streaks across the frame. Sometimes entire groups of people with their faces blurred out. One man swore his GoPro had recorded during the blackout despite being shut off. The footage showed 3 solid hours of static, except for a single frame, a frame of the deck, empty, no passengers. No crew, just rows of steaming cups on the railing, abandoned, as if everyone had vanished. When passengers pushed for answers, the crew grew defensive. Technical issues. That's all, but I saw the way their eyes avoided ours, the way they spoke in clipped tones. The way one steward dropped a tray when someone mentioned the frozen clocks. They knew something. They just weren't allowed to say. Everyone remembered. One detailed the same way. At exactly 12:17 a.m., just before the blackout, the aurora had exploded into white fire. Not green, not blue, white. The sky lit up so bright it burned after images across my vision. The ship's railings gleamed like bone. For a heartbeat, it looked as if the world had turned to ash and ice, and then silence. Time stopped. The ship kept sailing. Meals were served. Shows resumed. Crew brushed it off, but the voyage never felt the same. Passengers spoke in hushed tones, avoiding eye contact. Children cried more easily. Nights felt heavier, as if the blackout had left a weight that clung to the walls. And weeks later, even after I returned home, the effects lingered. My phone refused to keep time. No matter how often I reset it, the clock skipped. Sometimes forward, sometimes back. One photo in my gallery warped whenever I tried to view it. The one I took of the aurora just before midnight. Instead of lights across the sky, it showed a circle of faceless figures standing on the ice. And once, as I stared at the photo too long, I swear I saw one of them tilt its head, just slightly, toward me. They called it a glitch. A malfunction. A quirk of northern skies. But I know better. At 12:17 a.m., time stopped and something else stepped in. The ship kept sailing. But I don't think we ever really left that moment. And if you were there that night, like I was, you'd understand, because sometimes, when the clock on my wall stutters at 12:17, I feel the air go cold again, and I know they're still watching. They told us there were exactly 1-200 crew members on board. I remember the number because it was repeated every night in the announcements. Our crew of 1-200 is here to make your voyage safe and comfortable. But by the third night, I started noticing extras, people in faded uniforms, name tags I couldn't read, smiles stretched too wide, crew members who weren't on the roster, crew members who weren't supposed to exist at all. And once you see them, you realize how easy it is for someone, or something, to blend into a ship this size. The cruise had settled into its rhythm by the third night. Dinner at the buffet, music in the theater, passengers buzzing under the glow of the atrium chandelier, drunk on cocktails and the illusion of safety. You get used to the real crew quickly. Their crisp uniforms pressed daily. Their name tags, Daniel, Maria, Joseph, pronounced with polite cheer, voices rehearsed to the same rhythm. That's why the first report stood out. A couple swore a young man approached them in the atrium after dinner. Navy jacket. Name tag smudged, letters bleeding as if soaked in water. His uniform looked wrong. Too old, too faded, as if it had been washed 1,000 times too many. Still, he smiled, wide and welcoming. "I can show you a shortcut to the observation deck," he said. His teeth were grayish, like stones left in the tide. The couple followed him, curious. He led them down a stairwell neither had noticed before. The lights above flickered with every step. The air grew damp, carrying the sour tang of mildew. At the bottom of the stairwell, the man pushed open a door. It was chained shut, padlocked, rust streaking the steel. Strange, he murmured. Must have been closed after the accident. The couple turned to ask what he meant, but the stairwell was empty. I didn't believe their story at first. Drunk imaginations. Cruise gossip. But then I heard about the woman traveling alone. She swore she was woken by a knock at her cabin around midnight. Not loud. Just a polite tap-tap. When she opened the door, she found a maid standing there. The woman wore an old-style uniform. Pressed dress, apron, hair pinned back in a bun. In her hands, a silver tray with a teapot steaming gently. "Compliments of the captain," the maid whispered. Voice steady and low. The woman blinked in confusion. But the maid was already walking down the hall, heels clicking softly on the carpet. In the morning, the passenger asked at guest services why the captain had sent tea. The attendant frowned. "The captain doesn't send anything to private cabins." She described the uniform. The attendant's face went pale. That style hasn't been used in decades. The most chilling account came from a man named Harris. Middle-aged, sharp memory, not the kind to be brushed off. He insisted he had dinner one night in the restaurant, late after the crowds. He described the waitress who served him. Her name tag read Elena. Pale face, dark eyes, polite accent he couldn't place. She never blinked, he said. Not once during the entire meal. She guided him through a 3-course dinner, recommended the wine, joked about the rough seas outside. He remembered everything. The weight of the fork in his hand, the taste of the food, the warmth of the wine. But when he checked the time on his receipt, it was 11:47 p.m. The restaurant had closed at 9 a.m. The log showed his order in the system, but the kitchen reported no staff working at that hour, and when he asked to see the roster, there was no Elena listed among the crew. When he pressed the manager, demanding an explanation, the man snapped the ledger shut and said sharply, "You must be mistaken. You've had too much to drink." Harris swore to anyone who would listen that he hadn't imagined it. He still had the receipt. He still tasted the wine. After that, whispers spread fast. Some passengers admitted seeing crew members in outdated uniforms, guides, cleaners, waiters, who vanished when followed. One woman swore she was led down a hallway that smelled of salt water, only for the man ahead of her to dissolve into the dark. Others said they heard footsteps echoing in locked stairwells, voices speaking in old-fashioned dialects, conversations that cut off when the listener approached. And once, late at night, I walked past a service door just as it cracked open. Inside, I caught a glimpse of someone sweeping, but the broom handle was worn, splintered, nothing like the sleek ones I'd seen staff use. And the uniform, faded, edges frayed, fabric sagging like it had been soaked and dried too many times. The man looked up. His face was pale, lips tinged blue. He didn't smile. He just stared as the door slowly closed in front of him. When I went back the next morning, the door was sealed shut with a chain. On the 5th day, I gathered the courage to ask questions myself. I went to the restaurant and asked the manager about Elena. He grew stiff, avoided my eyes. No such person works here. When I pressed, he gave me a look I'll never forget. A look that wasn't anger, but fear. He leaned close and whispered, "Don't go looking for names you don't recognize." Then he shut the ledger with a finality that told me the conversation was over. By the last night of the cruise, no one spoke of it openly. The laughter was a little too forced at the bars. People avoided empty corridors. No one answered knocks at their cabin doors after dark, but I couldn't sleep. Something about the silence outside my cabin felt heavier than usual, so I wandered. The hallway stretched long and empty. The ship hummed faintly beneath my feet. And then, I saw her. A maid in the old-style uniform walking slowly, tray in her hands. She turned a corner and vanished. I followed against every instinct. The corridor she led me to was one I'd never seen before. The wallpaper was peeling, carpet stained with dark blotches. The air smelled of seawater and mold. At the end stood a heavy steel door, chained shut, and standing in front of it were 3 crew members, a young man in a navy jacket, a pale waitress with dark eyes, the maid with her silver tray, all of them watching me, all of them smiling. The chains rattled as the steel door shifted, as though something on the other side was pulling, waiting. I ran. When the ship docked, nobody mentioned the sightings. We disembarked quietly, each of us carrying something unspoken. But I'll never forget what one of the passengers muttered as we stood in line at customs. They said there were 1 in 200 crew members, but they never said how many of them were alive. Now, whenever I think about booking another cruise, I wonder, how many of those smiles are real? How many of those hands that serve your food, fold your sheets, guide you through locked doors, are still human? And worse, how many are just waiting to take you where the living can't follow? Cruise ship drills are supposed to be boring. They're designed that way. Lines of yawning tourists in orange vests, crew barking safety instructions, lifeboats lowering into the sea and rising again as nothing more than props in a rehearsal. No danger, no drama. But on the 4th day of our Alaskan voyage, that changed. An empty lifeboat went down. When it came back up, it wasn't empty anymore. What rose against the black ocean that night carried something impossible. Dozens of figures seated where no one had been. Their faces pale and water-swollen, eyes rolled back as if the sea itself had filled the boat with its own dead. The announcement came mid-afternoon, cheerful and routine. Ladies and gentlemen, please report to your assigned muster stations. A safety drill will begin shortly. Passengers groaned but shuffled out. Safety was mandatory. I found myself on deck 6 under floodlights that painted the rails white. Crew in crisp uniforms shouted instructions, demonstrating how to put on life vests. The sea stretched black and endless beyond, icy wind cutting across the deck. People snapped photos, half listening. "God, it's cold," a man muttered beside me. His wife nudged him. "Just smile for the kids." When the order came to lower the lifeboat, no one cared. It was background noise, part of the show. A bright orange lifeboat swung outward on thick steel ropes, creaking as it descended. Cameras clicked, kids pointed, and the deck hummed with chatter. The boat hit the waves with a splash, bobbing in the swell. It rocked gently, harmless. For 10 long minutes, it drifted. A couple joked that it looked like a bath toy. Crew scribbled on clipboards, unfazed. Then came the call, "Reel it back!" The winches groaned. Ropes tightened. The lifeboat rose, dripping seawater. That's when the noise stopped. Not the winches. They still whined. The people stopped. The laughter, the chatter, the jokes, everything fell into silence because the lifeboat was no longer empty. At first, it looked like shadows cast by floodlights. Shapes hunched in the seats, vague and shifting, but as the boat rose higher, those shadows solidified. Figures slumped forward, heads bowed, clothes dripping. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Are those people?" Dozens of them. Men, women, even a child. Their clothes didn't match. Some wore modern vests from our cruise line, others wool coats, lace blouses, and uniforms decades out of date. Their faces were pale, bloated, waterlogged. Eyes rolled white. Mouths hanging slack, caught in eternal gasps. The lifeboat clanged against the rail. Water spilled onto the deck, pooling at our feet, and the smell hit. Rot, brine, death. Screams cut through the silence. A woman shielded her children. A man swore loudly, backing away. Phones rose, snapping frantic photos. "Step back!" A crewman barked, his voice high with fear. But no one moved. We couldn't. Our eyes locked on those drowned faces. They didn't sway with the boat. They didn't breathe. They just sat there, still as mannequins, dripping seawater onto the deck. Then one of them twitched. A child's head jerked faintly upward. I swore I saw her chest rise, and then the floodlights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. The hum of the ship stuttered. The crowd screamed as one. For a heartbeat, I heard only the drip of water, louder than it should have been. Then the lights blazed back on. The lifeboat was empty, every seat bare. Only water pooled where bodies had been. The smell lingered, thick and undeniable. Crew snapped into motion, forcing passengers back inside. "Drill canceled," one shouted, voice cracking. Panic surged. People argued, cried, demanded answers. But the lifeboat was already being hauled away, secured like nothing had happened. By morning, the captain's voice slid across the speakers. Yesterday's drill was interrupted due to a mechanical malfunction. We apologize for the inconvenience. No mention of bodies. No mention of smell, but whispers surged across the ship. I saw them. They were real. They vanished. Passengers compared notes at breakfast. Photos showed nothing but blur. Videos cut to static the moment the lifeboat rose. One man swore he'd captured everything. But overnight, his phone reset, every file erased. Crew denied it all. Stress, illusions, trick of the lights. But I could still smell rot on my jacket. Theories bloomed like mold. A historian claimed the clothing matched passengers from a 1920s liner that sank in the Gulf, lost with all hands. They never found the bodies, he whispered. Others insisted the sea had filled the lifeboat with its own dead, proof that the ocean never forgets. Skeptics scoffed. Mass hallucination, they said, but I touched the rail where seawater dripped. It had been real. Over the next days, passengers reported missing items. Luggage gone, jewelry vanished, safes emptied. Crew dismissed it as theft or carelessness, but the timing matched the drill. One woman cried over her grandmother's locket, gone from her cabin safe. The sea takes what it wants, she said. At night, some claimed to see faces in the waves drifting alongside the ship. Others heard dripping in their cabins, even when everything was dry. On our last night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:13 a.m., the floodlights flickered. I rushed to the rail. The ocean glowed faint orange beneath, and for a moment, I saw them. Figures in the water, faces turned upward, mouths open, eyes white. They reached for the ship without moving their arms, drifting closer. Then the waves swallowed them. When I stumbled back inside, my shoes left wet prints. I hadn't stepped in water. We docked in silence. Crew smiled as though nothing had happened. No report. No mention. But the story lived. Passengers whispered in terminals, posted in forums, told friends in bars. Photos failed, but memories stayed sharp. The lifeboat full of drowned faces, the blackout, the smell of rot. Some call it a glitch. Others call it haunting, but me? I think it was a warning. The sea never forgets who it takes, and sometimes it sends them back. Cruise ships aren't built for mysteries. They're floating cities engineered down to the last bolt. Maps posted in every corridor, drills rehearsed until passengers can stumble half asleep to muster stations. Every door leads somewhere. Every stairwell connects where it should. But on the 5th night of our Alaskan voyage, one stairwell didn't. A group of passengers followed crew into a rear stairwell during a safety drill and never returned. Cameras showed them entering, their orange vests bright against gray walls, but no footage ever showed them leaving, because that stairwell didn't end. The night had been restless already. A storm growled on the horizon, lightning spidering across distant clouds. Passengers bundled in jackets shuffled toward muster stations. Crew barked orders, counting heads, directing traffic. To avoid overcrowding, one officer waved a group toward a rear stairwell, usually marked crew access only. About a dozen followed obediently, chatting nervously, vests squeaking as they walked. I remember a woman asking, "Are we supposed to go this way?" "Yes, ma'am, just down and through," the officer said briskly. The door clanged shut behind them, and that was the last time anyone saw them. At first, no one noticed. Drills are chaotic, people scatter. Muster officers assumed the group exited on another deck. But when the final roll call tallied short, eyebrows rose, cabins were checked, empty, luggage untouched. By midnight, security combed through surveillance. The footage was clear. 10:03 p.m., a line of passengers entered the stairwell door. No exit footage. No arrival at muster stations. They went in and vanished. Crew murmured about corrupted files, blind spots. But the timestamp ticked steadily. The cameras hadn't failed. The passengers simply didn't exist beyond that door. 2 crew volunteered the next day. They stepped into the stairwell armed with radios and flashlights, while security monitored. Minutes ticked by. Reports came through at first. Descending 1 flight. Nothing unusual. Then another. At the 7th minute, voices grew uneasy. "It's the same landing," one said. "What do you mean?" crackled the radio. "The same wall. Same number on the wall, 7. We've passed it 3 times. 10 minutes later, panic edged their voices. One dropped a coin on a step to mark their progress. 20 minutes after entering, they reported seeing the coin again, then the feed filled with static. When they returned, pale and shaking, they refused to go back. One muttered, "It loops." The other only said, "Don't send anyone else." That night, whispers spread faster than wine in the lounge. Some passengers claimed they heard screams through ventilation shafts, muffled but distinct, pleas for help that faded into sobbing. Others swore they heard footsteps pacing below their cabins, steady, heavy, deliberate. But there was no deck beneath. A woman on deck 6 insisted she felt vibrations under her floorboards, like someone stomping steadily upward. Security brushed it off. Pipes, machinery, but every story matched the same rhythm. 3 slow thuds, pause, 3 again, like something climbing. Only one person ever stumbled back out of that stairwell. A young man, mid-20s, collapsed at the threshold 3 nights later, dehydrated and trembling. His clothes were damp with sweat, lips cracked, eyes wild. Medical staff rushed him to the infirmary, but his words spread faster than treatment. He said he'd walked downward for days. Every landing looked the same. Gray walls, flickering bulb, the number 7 scratched into the paint. "We dropped things," he whispered. "Coins, bottles, anything. Every time, we saw them again." When asked about the others, his face contorted. "They're still down there," he rasped. "But something else is, too." He described footsteps echoing behind them. Always behind, never rushing, never slowing. It didn't chase. It climbed. Step for step. Like it had all the time in the world. He broke into screams, clawing at his ears, shouting, "It's still coming!" until sedatives silenced him. He was offloaded at the next port, never seen again. The captain wasted no time. Welders arrived at dawn, sparks flying as they bolted steel plates over the stairwell door. Thick rivets hammered into place, sealing it like a tomb. Officially, it was closed for renovation, but passengers whispered. We'd seen the work done in haste, guards stationed nearby, officers with pale faces and stiff jaws, and at night, the sealed door didn't stay silent. Guests walking past after midnight swore they heard it. Knocks, slow, deliberate, metal ringing through the corridor, sometimes 3 in a row, sometimes 4, always spaced evenly like a rhythm. One man pressed his ear to the plate. He swore he heard faint breathing on the other side. A woman reported fingernails scraping steel. Security dismissed it all. Pipes, expansion noises. But everyone noticed they stopped assigning cabins near that section. Passengers began reporting dreams, endless stairs. Flickering lights, the number 7 stamped on every wall. And always, footsteps following, louder with each turn. Some woke screaming. convinced they hadn't been asleep at all. One elderly woman was found wandering the corridor, muttering about going down too far. Another man woke drenched in salt water, his sheets soaked through though no pipe had burst. His ankles bore faint bruises, like fingers had wrapped tight around them. Crew stopped speaking of it publicly, but in quiet corners over late-night drinks, fragments slipped. It's not the first time. Other ships, other stairwells. They connect to somewhere else. One bartender leaned close to me, breath sharp with whiskey. We call them ghost decks. Places that shouldn't exist, but do. Passengers vanish. Doors lead nowhere. The stairwell is one of them. He refused to say more. On our last night aboard, curiosity overpowered fear. I walked deck 7 near the sealed plate. The corridor was empty, lights dim. My pulse hammered in my ears. At 3 a.m., the first knock came. 3 thuds. Slow. Deep. I froze. Then silence. Then 3 again. Louder. I pressed closer. My breath fogged against the steel. From behind it came the faint scrape of fingernails. Long, slow, dragging. And then the sound I'll never forget. Footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Climbing one step at a time. Getting closer. When we docked days later, the plate was still welded shut. Crew avoided eye contact. Disembarkation was brisk, cheerful, forced, no reports filed, no public acknowledgement. But among passengers, the truth needed no announcement. We had heard the knocks. We had felt the vibrations. We had seen one survivor stumble out raving about something that never hurried, never stopped, and we knew that behind that plate was a stairwell that didn't end, not escape, not safety, just something patient, climbing closer. Cruise ships are never truly dark. Even past midnight, there's always the hum of engines, the shuffle of night staff, the glow of safety lights running along the decks. Passengers who wander after hours learn to expect quiet, not silence. Lights off in the theaters. Bars closed. Dining rooms locked until morning. That's why it was wrong. On the 4th night of our voyage through the Alaskan Gulf, 2 passengers walking back from the smoking deck saw something they shouldn't have. The grand dining hall, bolted shut hours earlier, blazed with chandeliers. Through the glass-paneled doors, they saw tables laid with steaming food. And worse, chairs pulling back as if invisible guests had just sat down to feast. The couple, Mr. and Mrs. Hartman, swore they heard it before they saw it. Not footsteps, not voices. The sound of cutlery against porcelain. Curiosity pulled them close. Through the frosted panes, they glimpsed the impossible. Silver domes lifted from platters, roast meat steaming in candlelight, fruit bowls glistening with dew. The hall was supposed to be locked. Staff had cleared it hours earlier, yet when the Hartmans pressed against the glass, the chandeliers glared overhead, reflecting in polished cutlery. Then came the scraping sound. Every chair, dozens of them, slid back at once. The air filled with phantom laughter, and the Hartmans ran. By the time they reached the nearest steward, they were shaking, breathless. The steward frowned. Dining closes at 11. We saw it, Mrs. Hartman insisted. The tables were set. Food was steaming, her husband added, and the chairs moved. All of them. Within minutes, 2 guards escorted them back. Passengers gathered as the rumor spread. Everyone wanted to see. The guards unbolted the door. The heavy handles groaned. The hall was empty. Tables set, yes. Linen white, cutlery aligned, crystal glasses gleaming. But no food. No wine, no warmth. Only faint wet rings on the cloths, as if glasses had been lifted seconds before. The guards dismissed it. Lights left on, but the Hartmans weren't convinced. By morning, the ship buzzed. At breakfast, passengers leaned over plates of bacon and eggs, whispering about the midnight feast no one admitted hosting. Some laughed it off. Someone had too much to drink. Others leaned in, eyes wide. I heard it too. The clinking. Like a party going on. Crew dodged the question, smiles forced. But late that night, another couple claimed they heard it. Forks tapping, corks popping, a murmur of voices. Every time someone went to check, the hall stood silent. But always the smell lingered. Salt, wine, charred meat. On the sixth night, a young woman named Clara swore she saw more than sound or light. She had risen for water, wandering past the dining hall around 2 a.m. Through the glass she glimpsed movement, a pale hand raising a glass in toast. When she screamed, staff rushed to her side. They unlocked the hall, empty again, but Clara wouldn't let it go. It was there. Someone was inside. Crew members exchanged glances, their smiles cracking. Stress, they said. Exhaustion. Clara never ate in the hall again. By the next port, rumors hardened into legend. An older passenger, a self-proclaimed historian, told it best. When this ship was christened, the first voyage didn't go smoothly. Storms, mechanical failures. They say the inaugural banquet ended badly. Several passengers were lost overboard that same week. He lowered his voice. Some ships don't forget their first guests. The dead linger where they dined, where they laughed. Every night they gather, still feasting. He looked around the lounge, and every so often they invite the living to join. No one laughed. Over the next nights, evidence grew. Napkins found crumpled, though untouched at dinner service. Plates smeared with grease, though no meals had been served. A waiter swore he cleared the tables before locking the doors, only to find fresh crumbs of bread the next morning. Others noticed the smell grew stronger after midnight. Roasted meat. Spilled wine, citrus sliced fresh, no cameras ever captured it. Footage cut to static during the reported hours. By then, most passengers avoided Deck 3 after dark. On the 8th night, a man named Roland didn't return to his cabin. His wife searched frantically. His last known sighting? Standing outside the dining hall, pressing his ear to the glass. When crew opened the door, the room was empty, but his watch was found on the head table, ticking faintly in the silence. Official announcements claimed Roland disembarked early at the last port. His wife protested, screaming he never left. Security escorted her off the ship the next day. The story spread like fire. The dining room had taken him. Passengers began reporting dreams, feasting at long tables. Unable to move, knives and forks clutched in rigid hands. Invisible voices whispered over their shoulders, guiding their bites. Others dreamt of laughter, endless. Hollow laughter, while wine spilled down their chins, though they never swallowed. One man woke gagging, sheets stained with salt water, though no leak was found. By the 10th night, the captain sealed the hall, heavy chains across the doors. Signs marked closed for maintenance, but even chained, the room didn't stay quiet. Guests walking past swore they heard the party continuing. Glasses clinking, chairs scraping, knives tapping. One even claimed he smelled Roland's cologne near the doors. Another swore he heard his name called. I made the mistake of lingering there myself. At 2:17 a.m., I pressed close to the chained glass. The chandeliers blazed inside, brighter than ever. The tables were full. I saw them. Not shadows, not tricks. Figures seated at every place. Faces pale, some bloated, some thin, all with eyes like glass marbles. Forks rose and fell. Wine glasses lifted in silent toasts, and at the head of the table sat Roland. His watch gleamed on his wrist. His eyes rolled white as he lifted his glass toward me. Then the lights snapped out. When they flared again, the room was empty. We docked 3 days later. The hall remained chained, the staff silent, but no one forgot. Passengers whispered online, stories spreading across forums and travel blogs. They called it the dining room that served itself. Some said the ship was cursed from its first voyage. Others believed the dead simply refused to stop feasting, each new victim another guest at the endless table. Me? I don't know. But I can still smell it, the charred meat, the spilled wine. And I'll never forget the way Roland looked at me when he raised his glass, pale hand trembling.